This is a special edition of WeatherScope, comprehensive coverage of Hurricane Fran from the Weather Channel.
Large and dangerous Hurricane Fran continues to take aim at South and North Carolina, and it continues to move up to the north-northwest. Hurricane hunters have been investigating, and the latest from the hurricane hunters has the pressure holding steady and the movement still to the north-northwest. Let's show you where the storm is right now, and here's the advisory as of 8 a.m. And we've been checking with the hurricane hunters, and really nothing out of the extraordinary has happened since that advisory and the present. Still looking at winds about 115, still moving north-northwest at 14, and the pressure is still at 954 millibars. Center of the storm is about 215 miles southeast of Charleston, South Carolina, or about 225 miles southeast of Myrtle Beach, or about 240 miles off to the south of Wilmington, North Carolina. I might have given an erroneous report last time, but it's 240 miles south of Wilmington. So you can figure out the math there. 240 miles south of Wilmington, you can figure 15 miles an hour. So what we're talking about here is something in the order of about 15 hours from now or so. That's when the center of circulation will be very close, and about 12 hours for someplace like Myrtle Beach. So here's where the center of circulation is right here. And you can see it's been wobbling about as it moves its way off towards the north-northwest here. And if it continues with its movement there, it'll be getting very close to somewhere around the North Carolina-South Carolina border by late tonight, right around the midnight hour or so. But spiraling around the storm, we've been watching these orange and yellow areas. Notice, though, they've been kind of weakening as they near the coastline, so we haven't seen a lot of heavy rain move in. But notice, again, we do see another band down to the south here, and just watch it. It just comes rolling right around the center of circulation there. So it just seems like these bands are being catapulted around the center. So here's where the worst of the weather is. It's still offshore there. Here's where the core is, down as you hear on the radar. And we see lighter but steady rains coming on into the coastal areas. And we can see some of those heavier squalls just kind of paralleling the coast and kind of fizzling on us. So really haven't seen a lot of action move inland in South Carolina yet. In North Carolina, we have seen a couple of squalls here come up from the south. They've been drifting across the Pamlico Sound this morning. And there you can see them moving in from the east-southeast. But again, the core of the real bad weather is still down to the south and still a ways off. Okay, on the coast, we have a couple of our on-camera meteorologists. Jeff Morrow's in Myrtle Beach, and Jim Cantor is in Wrightsville Beach there in North Carolina. And both are in the path of this oncoming storm, and both are looking at a gray, sometimes wet morning, but nothing too significant yet. And Jeff, looking behind you, I see the tide. It looks like it's on the low side, and the waves don't look too rough either.
No, the winds aren't all that bad yet, Mark. The rain had just picked up briefly here about 2 or 3 minutes ago. Came down a little bit harder. That's why I have the hood up, but it's backed off again. And I'm sure that that'll continue to happen until one of those heavier bands that you were talking about, those orange bands on the Doppler, start to rotate in as we head on through the rest of this afternoon and early this evening. Randy's going to pan over here and show you some of the waves. It has come up a little bit. I know that where Jim is up in Wrightsville Beach, the swell was a lot higher than it is here, but we are seeing an increase in the wave action. It's probably about a 3-foot swell at this point, maybe 4 feet in some of the higher breakers. But again, that too will start to come up as we head through the day. A few white caps out there, but I'm sure that this is just the beginnings of the effects of the hurricane as it approaches the Grand Strand. And of course, we're concerned about any possible tidal or storm surge here. So we have to be very careful of that. If the storm center does move in north of here, the effects would be a lot less in this area. Okay, thank you, Jeff. Now let's go up the coast to North Carolina, to Wrightsville Beach, and here's Jim Cantori. Jim.
Well, Mark, as Jeff mentioned, the breakers here easily at 6 to 8 feet, white capping far offshore, and you can see as we kind of head out that way, a definite sign of the wind which is blowing in from the north-northeast. Now, what we've seen this morning is a slow increase in the winds, if you will, the steadier wind. And then occasionally what happens with the gusts is they get a little bit stronger and they last just a little bit longer. And each time we come back and talk to you, we're seeing more of that. You're looking at the Johnny Mercer Pier, or what's left of it, I should say. This is a chunk that was taken off, compliments of Hurricane Bertha, and we're kind of taking bets as to when the rest of this pier may go. And I'll tell you, for all of southeastern North Carolina, this thing definitely looks very, very serious. But hopefully we won't see it strengthen to a Category 4. Still too early to tell. Now, all the folks that you see on the beach behind me need to be out of here by noontime. There's still mandatory evacuations underway. from which started at 7 o'clock this morning here in New Hanover County. And we think that those evacuations will be complete by noon. We have no reason to believe that they won't. All the last-minute preparations also being well taken care of at this time, Mark.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned about people having to get out. We did get this fax here from the Ocracoke Emergency Management folks, and they said that the last Sound Class ferry will be leaving Ocracoke at 11 a.m. today to Swan Quarter, excuse me. So again, for those of you who live in eastern North Carolina, the last Sound Class ferry is going to be leaving Ocracoke at 11 a.m. today to Swan Quarter. And Jeff, I know you're very familiar with that area and the ferry service and how it gets discontinued when these storms approach.
That's right. In fact, they will move those ferries out of there, Mark. They'll probably leave the Swan Quarter ferry on the Swan Quarter side, and the Ocracoke Hatters ferry will probably be moved north. That's what they did for Bertha, of course. As Bertha came up, they get those ferries pretty much out of there and more toward a safer harbor. But, Jim, I wanted to ask you a question about what the folks up there, they must be feeling snake bit at this point. They had Bertha come up back in July, and now we have a stronger Category 3. They must be thinking, you know, why us?
Yeah, kind of like last year in Pensacola. You know, Aaron and Opal kind of combined to nail that city. No question, Jeff. People last night when I was talking to them, it was like, you know, Jim, what's going to happen? Is this thing going to come up here or what? I mean, yeah, they're saying Charleston, they're saying Myrtle Beach, but what about up here? And I said, there's no doubt that eastern South Carolina and southeastern North Carolina are going to be on the right semicircle of the storm, which is the most powerful side of the storm. And as Mark said, Jeff, this is a large storm with hurricane winds extending out well over 100 miles. So they're definitely prepared for the worst, bud.
And, you know, guys, I was talking with our lead forecaster early this morning, Matt Crowther, and, you know, we were looking at the storms all kind of converging over in eastern North Carolina. And we were thinking back to the storms about a year ago in the Gulf of Mexico, how they all seemed to point towards the Florida Panhandle. And Matt was saying how you look back at tornadoes, and it seems like they all tend to gather in the same area as well. So we were just kind of like saying, my goodness, it seems like that same thing might be occurring again on over and through here. Either one of you guys care to comment on that? Jeff?
Well, I agree with you. I mean, we have just as good a chance here at this point in time to deal with a semi-direct hit, if you will. Perhaps the worst area at the current pace and track of this thing would be down towards, you know, southern Brunswick County, which is the southern county in North Carolina. They're kind of shaped like a contact lens laying on its ends, and the water will be shoved up in there and it has no place to go. It cannot get out. We may see the worst storm surge there, but the wind area, again, will be all the way through Brunswick County and on northward, especially if this thing starts taking even a more northerly turn than it is now. Jeff, what about down your way? How's the thinking on what this thing's going to do in Myrtle Beach?
Well, right now we're just hoping. It's going to depend entirely, as you said, on where the eye comes in. If that eye would come south of here, Myrtle Beach would get the worst of it as far as storm surge and wind. And of course, if it goes a little bit farther up the coast, again, the winds would be more offshore here and would get much less storm surge. So people are wanting to know where that eye is going to cross, and that's what everybody's looking toward at this point.
And gentlemen, checking on the storm and coordinating with Tom Moore, one of our lead forecasters here this morning, we've just been looking at the upper air steering currents, and we've been noticing how the storm has just been wobbling about. This is a wobbler. And it's so the very weak steering currents, the low to the west and the high off to the northeast,
yeah,
storm wobbling about.
It in.
So,
momentum's probably carrying it in now, you think, Mark?
Well, there's definitely a quarter for it to move up to the north-northwest. So it just depends on the wobbles, it appears, from now.
Right.
Okay,
right.
Well, thanks, and we'll talk to you a little bit later on.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the latest from the beaches in the South and North Carolina. Still just a little bit of light rain coming on in, but we do anticipate